He told me about the affair at her wedding, but lost it when I raised my glass. The champagne flutes clinked in rhythm as Lily entered the reception hall, her dress shimmering under the soft chandeliers. I stood by the long floral arch, watching the girl I raised glide past me without even a glance. Richard took my hand, leaned in with a smile only I could see through, and whispered, "I'm in love with someone else. I thought you deserved to know. Today felt right." I didn't flinch. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I had expected it. The way he said it, like a courtesy. Like informing me of a weather change. Behind him, Elise stood in burgundy silk. She smiled at Lily like they were lifelong friends. I knew the truth. Elise wasn't just a guest, she was the storm he'd chosen. I adjusted the strap of my dress and said nothing. Silence was all I had left that could still cut him. He waited for a reaction, a sob, a slap, anything to prove he still had control. But I just turned and picked up my glass. He followed me to the head table, still wearing that carefully practiced smile. "We don't have to make a scene," he murmured. "Let's just be civil. For Lily. The girl who never called me mom. The girl I fed, taught, protected, now married, oblivious, and decorated with someone else's love. As the best man toasted, I watched Elise from across the room. She laughed at all the right moments, tilted her head softly. No one knew who she was, just that she came with Richard. That was always how he liked it, quiet, strategic disrespect. Wrapped in charm. Lily's voice trembled as she thanked her parents for their support. She looked only at Richard. Not once at me. I held my breath, then released it with a smile. Because even invisibility has a sound if you listen hard enough. The maid of honor invited everyone to raise a glass. I stood, slowly, my hand steady. Richard turned toward me, expecting compliance. Instead, I stepped forward and spoke, loud enough for Elise to hear. "To the bride and groom," I began, "may you never forget who stood beside you when it cost them everything." The room quieted. Elise lowered her glass slightly. Richard's smile dropped. Just a flicker. A crack. He whispered, "Julia, stop." But I wasn't speaking to him anymore. I turned to Lily and added, "And may you always know the difference between presence and performance." Her expression faltered for just a second. That's all it took. I took a sip. Then sat. Elise didn't raise her glass. Richard didn't sit. He stayed frozen, exposed by a single moment of quiet clarity. The music resumed. The room moved on. But he didn't. Later that night, in the parking lot, he grabbed my arm. "You humiliated me." I looked him in the eyes, calm. "No. You did that yourself. I just lifted the curtain." He drove off alone. Elise wasn't with him. She had left before dessert, without saying goodbye. Maybe she understood then, if he could do it to me, he could do it to anyone. I went home, took off my heels, poured a glass of wine, and sat on the porch. Alone. But not empty. Because when you've been erased quietly for years, even a whisper can sound like thunder, and that night, I was the storm. Richard and I met at a book launch in Boston. He was charming, curious, and asked me questions no man had ever bothered to. I was 31, newly tenured as a literature professor. He was 36, divorced with a quiet 7-year-old daughter, named Lily, and a dream of launching his own tech startup. I didn't just fall in love. I felt chosen. We dated for a year before he proposed, no grand gestures, just a candlelit dinner and a velvet box. "I need someone who believes in me," he said, slipping the ring on my finger. I smiled and told him I already did. That would become the quiet motto of our marriage. Lily was reserved, polite, always watching. Her mother had disappeared from her life when she was 5. Richard praised me often, "You've been more of a mother to her than anyone." I believed it. I packed her lunches, helped her with science fairs, held her when she had nightmares. I braided her hair for her first school dance. Our wedding was small. Just 30 people. Lily was the flower girl. She gave me a card that said, "Thank you for being my new mom." I kept it in a box beside my vows. That box still sits in the attic, untouched for years. Richard struggled in the early years of his business. I lent him part of my inheritance. To get it off the ground. "Just until the funding comes," he said. I co-signed the first office lease, helped him set up payroll, even edited his pitch decks between lectures. When the company took off, everything changed, slowly, but unmistakably. He traveled more, smiled less. "You wouldn't get it," he said when I asked about the long hours. "It's just business." But there were moments. Sunday breakfasts. Family movie nights. Quiet vacations where Lily clung to my side like she did when she was small. I held on to those pieces like pearls, rare, delicate, easy to lose. When Lily started calling me Julia instead of a mom, I let it slide. "She's becoming her own woman," Richard said. "Don't take it personally." But it did feel personal. Like I had served my purpose, and was now being gently filed away. I stopped teaching full-time to help him manage the home. We need stability, he said. You're better with the day-to-day. I agreed. I always agreed. I thought that's what partnership meant years past. We hosted holidays, funded Lily's college, renovated the house. On the surface, we were the portrait of success. But something beneath it was hollowing out. I could feel it every time. He introduced me as the one who keeps everything together instead of his wife. Once, on our anniversary, he gave me a framed photo of Lily, him, and I, from years ago. This is us, he said. But the frame had only his signature engraved. Not mine. Still, I stayed. Not out of weakness, but from the belief that I had built something worth saving. I had turned his chaos into comfort, Lily's grief into growth. I didn't want to abandon that work. He told me often how lucky he was. I couldn't have done this without you, he'd say at events. But at home, he grew quieter. Touches became brief. Conversations, logistical. We became roommates who shared calendars. The last vacation we took as a family, I found lipstick in his luggage. Not mine. He said it was the housekeeper's mistake. I said nothing. But I started keeping receipts, literal and emotional, because deep down, I knew. One day, he'd try to erase me completely. And I was making sure he couldn't. The first sign was subtle. A missed dinner. Client emergency, he said, texting me an apology with no emoji, no heart. I ate alone, reheated the lasagna, and told myself not to make it bigger than it was. One dinner can be forgotten. But soon, it became a pattern. He started referring to our house as my place on calls. I'd correct him gently, our home, but he'd brush it off with a laugh. It's just semantics, Jules. But semantics matter when you're being slowly written out of the story. His phone, once left on counters freely, began traveling with him from room to room. Bathroom, garage, laundry folding. Always face down. Always locked. I told myself I trusted him. But my stomach had already started folding into itself. Elisa's name appeared casually. She's just a branding consultant, he said. Really good with investor presentations. I asked if she was young. He said, she's polished. I didn't like that word. It felt rehearsed. At family dinners, he spoke only to Lily. Jokes, questions, praise. He'd pour her wine, ask about her wedding plans, and ignore me unless I was refilling a dish. I started to feel like the caterer, present, efficient, invisible. He bought Lily a necklace with their initials engraved. R&L. She cried when she opened it. I smiled politely. He hadn't given me jewelry in 8 years. The last thing he gave me was a robe, because you always seem cold lately. One afternoon, I walked into his home office and saw Elise on a video call. She laughed a little too easily, tilted her head too softly. He didn't introduce me. Just minimized the screen. We're finishing up, he said. I nodded. Walked out. Closed the door gently. My name disappeared from certain documents. Credit cards arrived under his business name. Insurance was redirected. He said it was for tax efficiency. I said nothing, but I wrote it all down. When I asked if he was happy, he replied, "Are you?" That's when I knew. He wasn't asking, he was preparing a defense. One that would paint me as complicit in my own neglect. At Lily's bridal fitting, Elise showed up. As a guest of the family, Lily said. Elise smiled warmly. I helped zip the gown, held my breath, and swallowed 1,000 unsaid things. I wasn't ready, not yet. He told Lily I was too traditional for some of the wedding ideas. She means well, he said, as if I were a distant aunt. I bought the table linens myself. I addressed every invitation by hand. No one noticed. He began complimenting me only when others were around. Julia's always been steady. That was his favorite word, steady. Not beautiful. Not brilliant. Just reliable. Like a furnace. Or a dishwasher. At night, he slept turned away. No good night. No touch. Just the quiet breathing of someone who had already left, and the silence of someone who hadn't. I found Elisa's bracelet once on our bathroom sink. Dainty. Gold. Not mine. I placed it in his sock drawer. He never mentioned it. Neither did I. Some things are louder when left alone. Every exclusion, every forgotten date, every new boundary drawn without consent. It wasn't a storm. It was erosion. And one day, I realized I was already standing at the edge. I found out for certain the day Lily left her wedding binder on the kitchen table. I wasn't snooping, just moving things. A folded piece of paper slid out, a list of VIP guests, handwritten by Lily. My name wasn't there. Elisa's was. Right under Father's +1. I sat down slowly, holding the paper like it might burn. Elise wasn't just a business contact. She was his date. At his daughter's wedding. The one I helped plan. The one I financed quietly, through a savings account I built with $40 birthday checks and canceled vacations. That night, I confronted him, not with rage, but with curiosity. Is she coming to the wedding? He blinked once. Then, nodded. Yes. I thought you knew. No apology. No guilt. Just administrative confirmation. Like rescheduling a dentist appointment. I didn't scream. I asked who she was to him. He replied, someone who sees me. You don't, not anymore. I felt that like a slap, not because it was true, but because it was rehearsed. He said, I'm not leaving you. There's no need to make this ugly. As if I should be grateful he was allowing me to remain. As if humiliation tasted better when served with civility. The week before the wedding, Elise joined Lily at a spa day. She's fun, Lily said. You're different. I nodded. Lily didn't know. Or didn't want to. I stopped trying. To tell the truth when everyone had already decided what their truth was. At the rehearsal dinner, Richard made a toast. To new beginnings. And to the people who remind us who we are. He looked at Elise. Not at me. Not once. I saw the bracelet again. This time on Elise's wrist. It matched the one Richard gave me years ago, same design, different stone. He'd recycled intimacy like it meant nothing. Maybe to him, it never had. The morning of the wedding, Lily asked Elise to help with her veil. I stayed in the corner, sewing a loose button. Elise posed in every photo. I adjusted the train. No one noticed. Richard wore the cologne I gave him. 10 years ago. The bottle had sat untouched for years, until Elise complimented it once at dinner. I recognized the scent immediately. Memory weaponized. Just before the ceremony, he found me in the hallway. You'll behave, right? He said. This isn't about you. I smiled gently. That's the problem. It never was. During the vows, Elise stood 2 rows behind me. She mouthed something to Richard. I didn't need to know what it was. The smile on his face told me enough. The first dance ended. The champagne was served. The mic passed around for toasts. I wasn't on the list. But when it circled back near me, I stood. Slowly. Calmly, and that's when I raised my glass because sometimes, you don't expose betrayal by shouting. You do it by making silence impossible to ignore. The day after the wedding, I stayed in bed until noon. Not from exhaustion, but from something heavier, grief without ceremony. No one died, but something inside me had. The woman who spent 20 years holding that family together didn't. Come back from the reception. I replayed his words, I'm in love with someone else. The tone haunted me more than the content. He said it like he was doing me a favor. Like the timing, at her wedding, somehow made it noble. I walked through the house like a guest. Every picture frame felt like a lie. Our vacation in Maine. Lily's graduation. Christmas mornings with matching pajamas. I stared at each image, wondering when I had stopped existing in them. The robe he once gave me was still hanging behind the door. I touched it, then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. I couldn't throw it away yet. It wasn't rage I felt. It was the ache of slow erasure. And I needed to study it before I could let it go. I didn't speak to Richard. I didn't answer his texts. Let's talk when things settle, he wrote. As if betrayal was a storm that passed, not a fault line that kept shifting under your feet. Lily sent a thank you card for the wedding contribution. No signature, just a typed message. No mention of the speech. No apology. I realized then, I had raised someone else's child and still ended up an outsider in her celebration. I cried once. In the laundry room. Not because of Elise, not even because of him, but because I had spent decades being good and still ended up discarded like clutter in a life I built. I started sleeping on the left side of the bed, the one he never used. It felt cleaner. Untouched. Like a place I could relearn myself without memories breathing over my shoulder. The silence in the house was loud. Not angry, just vast. I filled it with the ticking of clocks, the hum of the refrigerator, the sound of my own breathing as I tried to remember what it felt like to live for me. I found the envelope from our honeymoon. Still sealed. Inside were 2 dried flowers from our first dinner in Italy. I crushed them between my fingers. They turned to dust. Like us. I wrote in my journal each night. One sentence only. He chose her. I stood alone. I watched myself vanish. It wasn't poetry. It was evidence. I wasn't documenting pain, I was archiving the death of denial. I stopped wearing makeup. Not out of depression, but defiance. I wanted to see my real face again, the one that didn't exist to be looked at by him. I made tea every morning in silence. Sat by the window. Watched the same tree sway. I started to feel something unfamiliar. Not hope. Not yet. But space. Something unoccupied, and in that space, I whispered a sentence I hadn't dared say aloud. He didn't break me. He revealed me. I started with the safe. The one he thought I never used. The passcode hadn't changed in years. Lily's birthday. Inside, old tax returns, some jewelry, a flash drive. I almost missed it. Small, silver, unmarked. I plugged it into my laptop. And waited. It held presentation decks, branding files, and something else, a folder labeled Elise. Inside, scanned receipts, hotel confirmations, even scanned love notes in her handwriting. One file was a scanned NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. Her signature. His logo. Their secrecy, documented. I saved it all. Uploaded to a secure cloud folder. I titled it Witness. Not for revenge. For clarity. Because the truth wasn't about confrontation anymore, it was about proof. He had gifted her the same bracelet he once gave me. But hers was custom. The receipt was in his email. Paid with our joint card. Listed under consulting gift. I printed it and slipped it into a folder marked personal. I checked our financials. The joint account I once managed had quiet withdrawals over the last 2 years. Not large enough to alert the bank, but steady. Precise. He was moving money. Preparing. I called the firm that handled his startup incorporation. I used my name, the same name on the early investor documents. I'm updating my records, I said. The assistant paused, then emailed me a summary. My name had been quietly removed 6 months ago. Backdated. Illegally. I forwarded everything to a lawyer friend. Discreet. Sharp. She called me 2 hours later and said, "You have leverage. And he has no idea you know." I began documenting. More, screenshots, timestamps, messages he accidentally left open. Elise wasn't just the affair. She was integrated into the company. Illegally. Her name wasn't on payroll. But her expenses were being reimbursed. Quiet fraud. Corporate abuse. I found the prenup. Hidden under old appliance manuals. We had modified it 10 years ago. But he never filed the revised version with the court. The original, the one most favorable to me, still held power. He had forgotten. I had not. At Lily's post-wedding brunch, Elise sat beside Richard. I watched them. She laughed too hard at his jokes. He leaned in like he'd earned her. I clutched my folder under the table and felt nothing but precision. I met with a private financial auditor. She traced 5 accounts under Richard's name. 2 international. Linked to IP he developed while I was still legally part of the company. That made me a silent co-owner. That made him legally vulnerable. I created a second envelope. Labeled, Release. Inside, copies of the NDA, credit statements, the prenup, and the scanned gift invoice. I sealed it and stored it in my closet, beneath the wedding photo album. One day, I'd hand it to him. Not with anger. With timing. I wore his favorite perfume one evening, not for him. For me. To remember who I was when he still saw me. I wore it while deleting my access to shared platforms. I didn't need his world. I was building mine. That night, I looked at myself in the mirror. Truly looked. Not with mourning, but with calculation. I wasn't broken. I was curated. Prepared, and the moment he would realize it? Wouldn't be when I yelled. It would be when I smiled. I waited until Monday. He returned from a retreat with Elise. I didn't ask where he'd been. I was making dinner. Composed. I placed an envelope on the counter next to his wine glass. "Something for you," I said. He raised an eyebrow but didn't open it. The next morning, I was gone before he woke. I checked into a hotel under my maiden name. My lawyer had already filed the papers: divorce, asset claim, silent complaint to the board of his company. Everything clean. Legal. Documented. He called twice. I didn't answer. Then came the email, "We need to talk." I forwarded it to my attorney. She replied to him directly. "All communication goes through counsel now." Just like that, I became someone he no longer had access to. The board received the anonymous file on Wednesday. Elisa's unauthorized reimbursements. The NDA. Conflicts of interest. The footage. The receipts. I didn't sign it, but it carried my silence like a signature. Elise was removed from consulting duties by Friday. Quietly. The company website changed overnight. No announcement. Just absence. She texted him. I saw the message through a forwarded auto backup. "You said she'd never do anything." He didn't reply. Richard came to the house Saturday morning. I let him stand outside. Ring the bell 3 times. I watched through the curtain. He looked smaller. Not thinner, just reduced. Like ego collapsing into consequence. I opened the door just enough to hand him another envelope. "I know what you've done," he said. I tilted my head. "You're going to need to be more specific." He stepped back. "This is how you repay me?" I smiled gently. "No. This is how I leave with proof." That afternoon, the lawyer finalized the freeze on the international accounts. His assets became contested property. The very company he built with my funds and my silence was now my leverage. Lily called me that evening. Why didn't you tell me? I paused. Would you have believed me? She was silent. I just wanted my day, she whispered. You had it, I replied. And now I'll have mine. I hosted a dinner the following week. 10 women I had mentored. Former students. Friends. We sat under string lights in my backyard. Wine. Laughter. Presents. Richard had never been able to fill a table like that, not without performing. He emailed again. We don't have to destroy each other. I printed it. Highlighted the line. Filed it under delusion. Destruction requires 2 people. I hadn't destroyed him. I had simply refused to be erased. A journalist friend reached out. There's talk in tech circles about internal misconduct. I didn't confirm anything. I just said, some systems collapse under their own weight. I wore red to our final mediation. The same shade Elise wore at Lily's wedding. He couldn't meet my eyes. Why now? He asked. I leaned in slightly. Because I never interrupt a performance. But yours is over. We signed. He trembled. I smiled. That was the moment it truly ended, not with papers, but with my calm. Because the best revenge isn't loud. It's walking away while they're still trying to explain why you didn't scream. I didn't sell the house. I repainted the walls, changed the curtains, donated every object that once belonged to the life I sustained alone. The silence that once haunted me now sounded like peace. No footsteps. No gaslighting. Just air. Honest and unfiltered. I moved the wedding album to the attic. Not as a wound, but as an archive. The story didn't define me. It just reminded me how far I had come from who I used to beg to be seen by. I started writing again, not about him. About women like me. Quiet pillars in loud homes. One essay went viral. Someone commented, she wrote what I lived. I saved it. I traveled. Not far. Just far enough to rediscover myself in unfamiliar mirrors. I took a photo on every trip. No selfies. Just places I could stand in without shrinking. Evidence that I existed, without being needed. Lily reached out. Slowly. Cautiously. I know what he did now, she said. I didn't gloat. I just said, you don't have to choose. But I won't be erased again. She cried. I didn't. I had already done my grieving in silence. I kept Elise's bracelet. Not out of spite. But because symbols have power when you strip them of pain. I placed it next to my old ring in a glass box labeled, Things I Survived. I changed my name back. Julia Reed. My students had once chanted it in lecture halls. It felt strange at first, like trying on a coat from another life. But it fit. Perfectly. Again. I started dancing on weekends, small community classes, barefoot on old wood floors. No one there knew what I had endured. They just saw a woman who laughed quietly and stayed after to help sweep up. Richard's company stalled. Investors pulled back. The board voted in new leadership. His photo disappeared from the website. Elise moved on. She was never built for collapse. I never said a word about it publicly. Not in interviews. Not to friends. Just a quiet knowing. The kind of power that doesn't need confirmation. He emailed once more. I miss what we had. I didn't respond. He had missed it while he had it. And I wasn't a memory. I was a woman who had risen. I hosted my birthday with 30 people. Candles. Jazz. Stories. One friend toasted to, the strongest woman I know, not because she fought, but because she never let pain define her voice. I stood. Raised my glass. And said only one line, to what we bury, and what blooms in its place. No applause. Just clinking glasses. Quiet tears. Real presence, because in the end, I didn't want revenge. I wanted to be whole, and I am.